All right, looks like they're underway here. So, if you guys are new to this, welcome to Final Fantasy One. This is the PSP version of the game. This is the most recent remake of it, not including mobile remakes of this. So, this is basically the same as the other versions of the game, except it has significantly improved graphics, audio, quite a bit of quality of life changes, and a very important glitch that has been introduced in this version and only in this version of the game, known as the equipment glitch. So they can essentially pick up items from one category of equipment, either weapons or armor, periodically throughout the run. They can usually find them in treasure chests or they can purchase them in certain shops. And utilizing an unusual property of the memory cursor function in this game, they can go into the equipment screen, select a character, select one of their equipment slots, and then at the same time that they do that, they attempt to scroll over to the next character using either the R or L buttons at the same time that they try to press X to equip an item. And this confuses the game into loading the wrong item ID or loading the item ID of the slot that they chose from the first character and loading the weapons with the corresponding IDs or armors of the corresponding IDs to the slot on the character that they link up to the other that they scroll to. So if they scroll into, or if they start on like the weapon slot of the warrior and they scroll over to the thief at the same time that they press X to equip something on the warrior, it loads the list of IDs of the equipment that the warrior can equip that's in their inventory. But if the cursor is on a different, like an armor slot for the thief, it loads the items that are correspond to the same IDs for the armor table instead, and all the pieces of equipment that can go on any of the 4 armor slots can be part of that. So that's what they're utilizing in order to obtain extremely overpowered equipment that allows them to trivialize many of the random encounters you're going to see throughout this run here. So in the early going, they stopped into Cornelia to pick up a hammer from the weapon shop there, and they turned that into a piece of armor known as the Knight's Armor and put that on each of their characters. This is something you could normally buy in Melman for a lot of money, but by performing this glitch, they can essentially get free copies of it on each of their characters, and this is so much defense on their characters that their characters are not at risk of taking much damage at all from enemy encounters in the early going. So they don't have to level up or anything, they can just continue on here. And then additionally, once they get into the Chaos Shrine over here, they can duck into that treasure room to pick up a leather cap and do the same style of glitch to turn the leather cap into a piece of equipment known as the Judgment Staff. The Judgment Staff is a piece of equipment that was added as part of the additional bonus content in this version, which is only supposed to actually drop from the super boss in the final bonus dungeon called the Labyrinth of Time. And it is the most powerful staff in the game, which when you use it as an item in combat, casts Flare, the black magic spell, the level 8 black magic spell. So right off the bat, 2 minutes into the run, they each have access to Flare. And they've put one staff on each of their characters, so they have 4 staffs total. And the staff also has more attack power than any of the weapons that are available to them right now, so they can basically one-hit Garland or do 1 round of it. So the question is, does it allow the fighter to put equipment on a thief and other characters? Yes, it does. The only real restriction is that when you're glitching from one character to another, they basically have to be next to each other in the party order. So that's why they've specifically picked this party, and it's also why they've specifically ordered the party the way that they have right now. So when they pick up the hammer, this is a piece of equipment that both the warrior and the white mage can equip naturally. Which means that they can both glitch it onto the other characters. So by putting them next to each other, they are collectively next to each of the 4 party members and can use that to put Knight's Armors onto all 4 characters. And similarly, the leather cap, all the classes in the game can actually equip that, and so they're all capable of using that to glitch onto adjacent characters. So those are the 2 earliest glitches you're going to see early on in the run here. So they have tons of additional defense on their characters and don't need to level up from random encounters. So they'll be trying to flee from everything at this point because they'll just be the additional stats that they're gaining from the equipment they glitch essentially reduces the entire need to grind over the course of the run, with one exception, which we'll see later on. Was the Judgment Staff available in the Dawn of Souls release as a drop? It may have been. I mean, I believe the Thief's Armlet that they will be glitching later is available. Many of the items they are glitching are not normally available because they were added as drops from the super boss in the Labyrinth of Time dungeon in this version of the game. So notably the Lust Dagger, the Barbarian's Sword, the Survival Vest, and I believe the Lordly Robe as well are all potential drops from different versions of the super boss Chronodia. So here we see them. They've made their way through. I mean, their first goal was to basically rescue Princess Sarah from the clutches of Garland in the Chaos Shrine. By rescuing her and returning her to Cornelia, the king thanks you by building a bridge. Bridge opens up this land path they have over to the next town, Provoca, where they can fight a group of pirates to obtain a ship, and that gives them access to even more areas on the overworld here. So right here, they're on their way to Provoca. Looks like Suiko is the first one into the town here and is ducking into the shop here. So he made one additional copy with a glitch of the knight's armor from earlier and then opted to sell that, and that sells for 18,000 gil, which is more than enough to give them a stash of supplies like potions, antidotes, and ethers really early on. That should cover pretty much their entire consumable list for the entire run here. So once Suiko's all set here, he's going to go confront the pirates here. And normally in NES and other versions, you don't have super powerful spells here, or at least AoE spells. So you usually have to attack these guys either one by one or use spells to take down these pirates. And that would probably necessitate 3 rounds since there's 9 pirates and there's only 4 of your characters to do that. But thanks to the power of the Judgment Staff here, we can essentially just one-shot these guys because it does more than enough damage. And just makes it a nice 1-round fight here. So they're basically tied right now. Now they each have the ship, so they'll be using that to make their next way over to Alfheim. Looks like Box is opting to shop afterwards. Suiko's already done his shopping, so he's just going to move on a little bit. These guys are going to be using, it looks like, slightly different routes probably in terms of what items and spells they acquire, but in general they'll be playing a very similar overall route. That indeed looks to be the case. It looks like Suiko may have accidentally not put a weapon or not put an armor on his warrior, or maybe he unequipped it accidentally and sold it. So his warrior is taking significant damage. The other possibility is that the enemies are critting because the crits ignore defense. The battle mechanics are basically the same. I mean, all of the spells are essentially the exact same, but they actually work in this version. So, I mean, many of the bugs that existed in the NES version have been corrected and fixed. So you don't have spells accidentally doing things, actually doing the wrong thing or nothing. In this case, they actually do what they're supposed to be doing. They've fixed many of the weapons that have elemental properties or properties against certain enemies are fixed in this version of the game. The most notable battle mechanic change is that they have removed spell charges in this version, and they have replaced it with an MP system that's similar to other FF games. So the spells still have levels, so they're still associated with specific levels, and they need certain level requirements in order to be able to purchase and use spells, along with certain class and class requirements, including job upgrades. And then one additional addition in this PSP version is there is a defend command which allows them to essentially just pass the character's turns. They don't necessarily have to make their white mage attack for minimal damage, so they can just opt to skip that by using the defend command instead. But otherwise, it's a very similar run. They're still just going to have to plow through many random encounters and just walk their way. The only major difference is that thanks to the properties of the equipment glitch, they really just don't need to grind, so we don't have to sit here and fight ogres for hours to get the levels that we need to be able to survive, because the equipment makes up for the difference. Yes, there are still preemptive ambush. There's still preemptive attacks. There's still ambushes and normal attacks here. And if you see a preemptive attack, that means that your characters will successfully flee on the first attempt on that opening round, if you so choose. So it's a free chance to run, and you won't see that in boss fights. Boss fights cannot be preemptives or ambushes. So no special there. If they're ambushed, then every enemy gets one free attack gets a free round of combat attacks before they get to act in combat, and that can be really, really dangerous against certain enemies, depending on what's going on here. So normally you would probably grind in the NES version to try to get some levels to be able to survive this upcoming fight against the wizards in the NES version. They're known as Pisco Demons in this version, but again, with the power of the equipment glitch and many of the other conveniences in this one. So there's also items like Phoenix Downs and Ethers exist in this version of the game, whereas those did not exist in the original NES version of the game. So it's easier for these players to be able to recover from a mistake. And also there is a save anywhere function in this game, so they can play super risky and then just save before danger spots like either these Pisco Demons here, or especially before like Lich, because Lich is one of the most dangerous fights in this particular category. I am not sure if the Judgment Staff is in the GBA version. I could probably find that out for you guys. Let's see. Yeah, Phoenix Downs are a thing. You've got gold needles are a thing. Antidotes and ethers, just like that. There's also, obviously, as a quality of life change, you can bulk purchase items now in here, so you don't have to buy them one at a time from the shopkeepers. So, moving on. Plus, they can also mash and use items in combat. So they could, or in the menus. So if you want to heal a warrior with like using 2 or 3 potions, you can actually very quickly use that in the menu, so you're not stuck with really long animations here. So they made their way into the Marsh Cave, which is part of the story progression here. They have to pick up a crown from a trapped chest on the 3rd floor. So as soon as they step on the tile in front of the chest, it forces an encounter with those Pisco Demons, and there's no way to avoid that fight. But once they've obtained the crown, they're basically working their way over here directly to Western Keep, where they're going to trade it to the Elf King over here, who is actually the Dark Elf Astos, posing as the Elf King. Hey, Roach, how you guys doing? Welcome in, everyone who's just joining us. So this is our Total Chaos tournament. For those that are wondering, Total Chaos is just the name of the tournament. This is basically the PSP any percent category of the game. The expected runtime is usually between an hour 30 to an hour 45. It depends on player skill, and there's a heavy RNG factor in this particular category here. So this fight against Astos is also kind of trivialized by this particular round here. Astos has 420 HP, and the general strategy here is to try to attack with the Judgment Staffs, with the melee characters, the Warrior and the Thief, and to use the Judgment Staff as an item with the Mages. The Mages, their damage when using the item is based on their intelligence, which is significantly higher than the melees, which is why they use it in combat. So they both got through that fight, and they're basically neck and neck right now, which is very cool to see. It's entirely possible to see players get kind of blown out by the RNG very early in the run, where it just looks like somebody has fallen multiple minutes behind their opponent through no fault of their own. But right now they're pretty even. But the wonderful thing about this particular category, and the reasoning for the name, is that because of the RNG, you can often see extreme swings in lead changes and things of that nature. So even though someone can grab like a 2+ minute lead, it could easily evaporate over the course of a single dungeon if one person gets extremely poor RNG. Yeah, each one of these encounters they get in here, assuming the best case scenario where it's not a preemptive and it's not an ambush and they're able to run on their first try, it takes about 6 seconds in terms of animations. Like the fade in animation, queuing up the attacks. They can hold L and R at the start of combat if they just like to flee and that will automatically issue a fleet command to all their characters, so they don't have to manually select it. They can also manually select it if they'd like. It just takes more time to do that than if you hold L and R. So here's a slight differentiation here. Suiko, having gone into Alfheim, well, having gone past Astos now, he's gotten enough experience on his Black Mage to be able to learn a couple key spells, particularly Fyra and Thundara. So he went here into Alfheim now that he's level 8 to be able to purchase those. And additionally, he's ducking into the item shop over here to pick up gold needles, which is a safety item for races. Hopefully he won't need those, but if he does, he's going to have them available. So he opts to do that shopping now. Box is instead using a slightly older route, which is no less competitive. They're basically equivalent routes. They just do shopping and item. They just slightly pick up different items and do different things in a slightly different order, but they're largely equivalent routes. So Box is not going to be grabbing spells. What he's going to be doing instead is picking up items that can be glitched into combat usable items, such as a Mage's Staff or the Gauntlets later on, and these can cast the same spells that Black Mage can learn right off the bat. The advantage of using that is that any of his characters can take advantage of the combat items to cast it in combat. But the power of Box's strategy is that he can get access to Thundara much earlier, because you can't really get Gauntlets until probably halfway through the run, whereas you can buy Thundara right now. And Thundara is extremely helpful against sea encounters. So sea encounters such as these Sahagin and Big Eyes can be very problematic for our party right now because these enemies have high agility and our characters do not, since we are considerably lower level than usual here. So they can be used to clear enemy packs such as those in case they are problematic to run from for some reason. So once they have the crystal line from Astos, they make their way here to Matoya's cave, back towards the start of the game, as that's the next step in the story. They have to basically trade that to Matoya to return the crystal eye to her to pick up a Jolt Tonic. Once they have the Jolt Tonic here, they'll return to Alfheim and awaken the slumbering Elven Prince with it. And he will reward them with one of the most important key items in the entire run is the Mystic Key here. So once we have the Mystic Key, that unlocks a bunch of treasure rooms that have been previously locked, including a bunch of treasure chests that we need access to. And the first treasure room Box is going to see here is going to be right here in the same castle. But the quickest way to actually get to this treasure room is to exit out of the castle and then just immediately re-enter it, because that puts you right back at the start of the area and just skips you having to walk across half the map here. So he's going to go to the treasure room in the back here, and he's going to pick up a Mithril Hammer from this particular chest. And he's going to do that because he can turn that into a piece of post-game equipment from the bonus dungeons known as a Thief's Armlet. So he can glitch this on all 4 of his characters. And each time he puts it on one of his characters, each of these Thief's Armlets is putting on an incredible amount of defense, evasion, and is also adding 5 points of agility to these character stats. So that immediately raises their ability to take turns early in combat and increases their run chances. So that greatly speeds up combat from random encounters from this point on. And it's the first of several glitches where we're picking up agility-based gear to try to help that out through the run. Box is opting to shop now and pick up his gold needles. It's entirely possible for these runners to actually get through the entire run without gold needles, but it is not recommended for races, because if a character is petrified and you don't have a needles, that could very quickly derail the entire run. Box getting our encounter with Buccaneers here. They're usually the easiest of the encounters to get into and flee from on the sea, so those are the ones you want to see the most. You don't really want to see Sahagins, you don't really want to see Big Eyes especially, because Big Eyes have a nice gaze attack which has a nice long animation, and they're trying to minimize the amount of time in combat, so the less enemies that get attacks off, the better for them. Box is going to pick up a Mithril Knife here. Now these treasure chests in Cornelia, now that we've obtained the Mystic Key, they are unlockable, and we can go in here and pick up this key item, the Nitro Powder. And Box also opted to pick up that Mithril Knife in the other room that's next door. That can be used to glitch a piece of armor known as a black robe, which can be used to cast Blizzara in combat. So he'll be using that against enemies that are weak to ice later on in the run. There's not too many of those in the early going. Suiko, on the other hand, is going to opt not to pick that up at this point. He's just going to probably purchase Blizzara at a later point, but he's going to need to be at a higher level with his Black Mage in order to do that. So their next step, once they have the Nitro Powder here, is to give it to the Dwarf Narek over here in Mount Duergar. This is the home of the dwarves here. And we got Narek located all the way down here. So the ultimate goal of getting the Nitro Powder here is they're essentially landlocked in the early run part of this run, and they can't proceed any further until they can open up a path on the sea that allows them to get to the other portion of the world. By giving the TNT to Narek over here, it opens up a path for them to be able to sail through and then reach the rest of the world. So right now they're just wandering over and trying to get over here as quickly as possible. Box has opened up a little bit of a lead here. Not a huge one. Box's warrior is dead. This might be a stylistic choice. He might be opting to just leave his warrior dead at this point, to raise the amount of experience that could be gained by the other characters. There's an experience share system in this game, so the amount of experience you get from defeating enemies is essentially split among all surviving party members at the end of combat. So if you have only 3 members standing instead of 4, they get more experience than if all 4 are standing at the end of combat. And they'll be taking advantage of this for a short grind section later on. Notably, from this point on, they're not going to be healing usually their melee characters. They'll be trying to keep the melees alive to give them an extra chance to, take a character turn in combat and use that and can flee with them. They don't want them to have too much HP because they want to be able to kill off the warrior and the thief at a certain point to facilitate a short grind session for the mages so that they can get some experience. But Boxes opened up the path, and now he's made his way over to Melman, which is immediately afterwards. And we're going to do this to pick up arguably the most important item in the entire game, the steel gloves, from this shop, because this can be turned into the most powerful sword in this entire version, known as the Barbarian Sword. And additionally, Box is going to use a leather shield that he purchased earlier back in Provoca in order to turn that into a mage's staff, which can be used to cast Fire for his party in combat. So the Barbarian Sword, if you're comparing it to weapons from the original game, I believe the Excalibur from the original game has something like plus 50 or 50 attack power, and the Barbarian Sword in this version has 125, which is 2.5 times that, and on top of that has a 15-point bonus to strength. So it is ridiculously overpowered, especially at this early part of the game. And thanks to the property of the equipment glitch, we can also put on characters that would normally never be able to equip that. So it's normally only equipable by like knights and red wizards, I think. But in this particular version, we can glitch it immediately onto a thief. And with the agility of the thief and the strength, he can actually get a ton of hits from his hit bonus and do just ridiculous amounts of damage. You'll see that pretty shortly. And meanwhile, Box is making his way through the Cavern of Earth. This is our first trip here. We're going to have to make 2 trips in order to reach the Lich, the Guardian of the Earth Crystal at the bottom here. But on this first trip, we can only proceed as far as Vampire before we get essentially blocked from our path, and then we'll have to backtrack. So yes, yeah, the Thief is actually one of the most critical characters in this particular version. The warrior is essentially in the party because he's able to facilitate many of the glitches and is also a strong melee damage dealer and tank that can just take tons of hits. The thief does the most physical damage with the properties of the equipment glitch, able to do that in this run. The black mage is going to be useful for casting spells to clear out groups of unrunnable enemies that we'll see later on, as well as he's going to pick up teleport, which is going to save considerable time backtracking through a lot of the dungeons. And then finally, the white mage is in the party primarily as a healer for chaos, because he will be healing every round in order to make sure that our party is able to survive the final fight at these very low levels. So Box is here on the 3rd floor. This is probably the first danger point of the run. You can start to see Pisca demons, which are unrunnable here. This is like the first location you can see unrunnable encounters. And so long as he doesn't see those, he's okay. He doesn't really want to see those at this point, because he has to stop and fight them if he sees them. It's the same for Box here, but there's also nasty enemies such as cockatrices or undead, which can, inflict status effects on our party. Notably, cockatrices can petrify our party members, and if they happen to get ambushed, that can quickly spell a danger for the party. So utilizing the power of the Barbarian Sword here, Box essentially one-shots the vampire. So he's a total pushover in this version. Many of the bosses here, with the exception of some of the bosses like Lich and Kraken and Tiamat, are extreme pushovers, just thanks to the overpowered gear that we have. So they're both on the same floor here. Looks like Box is on his way back out. And Suiko's trying to make his way to Vampire. These guys are going to high-five right as they go past each other. Both of them look to be getting pretty good RNG on this floor. They're not getting too many nasty encounters. Neither one of them has seen Pisco Demons, at least. But this is one of the biggest swing points you can see in the run in terms of somebody getting a lot of nasty encounters, and that can slow them down considerably. So there's a very high RNG factor in this particular run. They're both going to be... The run itself is pretty consistent, but the amount of time it takes to do that is really just dependent on the number of encounters you get, what kind of encounters you get, and just how lucky you are in general. How quickly you can make decisions in combat, if you can identify which groups of enemies are runnable or unrunnable, how quickly you can enter commands in to make sure that you can take out these enemies as quickly as possible. So those are things they can control, is like how quickly they can identify groups and respond to them appropriately. But in terms of how many encounters they get, there's really not much they can do. So they just have to deal with whatever comes along at this point, and then hope that they don't fall too far behind. But if one person's getting extreme RNG, the chances are that the other person's going to get some poor RNG at a later point. So you'll see a chance for these guys to essentially have a chance for lead changes later on, or catch-up mechanics. If somebody also happens to wipe their party later on and forgets to save, that could also totally even up this match at late points. So Box made his way down to the 3rd floor there and picked up a Star Ruby in a chest that was immediately after the vampire, and has to bring it here in order to make this giant move out of the way in the giant's cave. And that opens a path for him to get to Sada's cave here once he exits out. Sada will reward us with the Earth Rod once we've defeated Vampire, and this Earth Rod is needed to access the lower floors of the Cavern of Earth in order to confront Lich. So this path is essentially fixed in the early going. We just kind of have to play through this very large fetch quest to get to Lich in the early going. The ultimate goal is they have to defeat the 4 elemental fiends, Lich, Merilith, Kraken, and Tiamat, in order to fight Chaos, the final boss. But there's actually some flexibility in terms of how they choose to fight the fiends after Lich. Once they have defeated Lich, they gain access to a canoe, and a canoe opens up their ability to go get other modes of transportation and opens up other areas they can reach on the world map. So that is the big block that they have to deal with in the early 30 minutes of the run. But once they have that, they can essentially tackle the other bosses in any order. They're going to probably use the same order, though. Most likely they're going to be following the story order with Merilith, then Kraken, then Tiamat. And that's mostly just due to they can tackle the Mount Gulg, they can tackle Merilith and Mount Gulg at pretty much any time. But they'll pick a convenient time when it's along their route here. But the reason they tend to tackle Kraken before Tiamat is because there's a key item needed to be able to access Tiamat's dungeon located in Kraken's dungeon. So you'll often see them go to Sunken Shrine first so that they can pick up the key item before they can go to the Flying Fortress where Tiamat is. And if they opted to do it in a different order, they just have to make multiple trips to the shrine, which is just not very good for time. So Suiko is here to pick up the Earth Rod from Sada. Box, meanwhile, is trying to make his way back to the Cavern of Earth so he can go confront Lich. So Box has opened a little bit of a lead here. But his Thief died here, so it's going to cost him a few seconds of menuing to get him back up. He doesn't want his Thief dead yet, and he would prefer to keep the Thief alive just because the Thief has one of the highest agility of the party members, which means he's one of the most valuable members for running away from encounters. This is a really nasty encounter that Box has gotten here. He's particularly hoping that his characters do not get paralyzed, at least not all 4 of them, so that he has a chance to respond to this. If all 4 of his characters are paralyzed, then he's completely at their mercy, and until either paralyzed wears off on one of the characters, or one of them is able to tag and either take an attack to kill them all or to try to run away. And you could be sitting there for quite a while if all 4 characters get paralyzed at the same time. We just call that a paralock usually. So that nasty encounter is almost even this entire race up, because now they look like they're neck and neck. Yep, they're dead even entering Cavern of Earth here. And it actually looks like Suiko is pulled right ahead just because he got no encounters on that opening floor here. So when we say things can change very quickly, they definitely can change very quickly, and that's a perfect example of that. So you might actually see these guys trade the lead a couple times, depending on their encounters. It's one of the most exciting things about this particular tournament, though, especially as watching it as a viewer. It can be very frustrating as a runner when you're running this, because you could see yourself building a nice lead, and then you could watch it evaporate like Box did through no fault of your own. So here we see Box taking his first safety save here. And that's just because he wants to give himself the ability to recover in case he runs into a really nasty ambush against, in particular, I think cockatrices is what he's hoping to avoid. There could also be undead enemies that could do the same thing that they just did on the overworld, which is ambush him and paralyze him before he can respond. So Box ran into an unrunnable group of Pisco Demons here, so if he happens to see them, he's got to stop and fight them. And here we go with another. Here's a 7 enemy ambush for Box. So this isn't particularly dangerous for him, but it just wastes a lot of time as he's got to sit there as 7 enemies take their turns. And meanwhile, Suiko has used the Earth Rod to clear the path, clear the block that was blocking our path at the end of the 3rd floor. So now he's onto the 4th floor here, and he's got one more floor to go after that to reach Lich, who was the first real block in this run. It's one of the most dangerous fights coming up. So very likely you're going to see both runners save before that fight, just in case. The Lich can cast Blazara, and a lot of times that does more damage than our party members even have HP, thanks to the low levels our characters have. So it's entirely possible that if the Lich gets that attack off, it's almost certainly going to wipe the party or pretty much cripple it. Suiko is a little bit less than a floor ahead of Box right now. He's about to get off the 4th floor after one more. He's probably got one more encounter left, but they're both getting ambushed here. So the lead is probably about maybe 15-20 seconds right now. Suiko's getting a nice run over to Lich here. But he's coming right up on Lich here, so he's going to probably take a safety save right here, which is a very wise idea. So their goal here is they're just going to basically try to one-round Lich with their Barbarian Swords as quickly as possible. Specifically, their melee character is going to be trying to damage race the Lich before Lich casts Blizzara. They have to do 1,200 damage in order to take Lich down. They can optionally attack or use spells with their melee with their mages, but they don't necessarily have to. But as little as 2 hits is usually enough to take down Lich here. So Suiko gets it on the first try. Box is going to save and take his turn now. So let's see how Box does on this one. Also getting a crit from the Thief is very good. That's a low roll from the Warrior, though. That's going to cost Box. That's probably a wipe. Yep. So he's going to take a quick reset. So this is why these guys save that, because they need to be able to recover and continue the run if that happens. And there isn't really any point for them healing before this fight, because in most cases their maximum HP is lower than the amount of damage that Lich can do, especially on their mage characters. So that wipe unfortunately cost Box probably about 20-30 seconds. Oh, here's another Blizzara here. This is really unlucky for Box here. There's really nothing he can do other than try to race him and kill him. But it's just putting him behind. We'll see if third tries the charm for Box now. Suiko, meanwhile, now that he's out of there, he's just going to make his way over on a long sail over to Crescent Island. As now that we've defeated Lich, one of the Circle of Sage NPCs over there will reward us with a canoe that will let us get to other areas. That's a strong hit from the Thief there. There we go. That's what Box was looking for. He would have much preferred that if it happened on the first fight rather than the third fight, but as long as he gets through it, he's okay. So now they can continue on. Suiko looks like he's got about maybe a 2-minute lead right now, just due to those repeat fights. So Suiko's going to make his way over to Crescent here, and about to enter. And he's got a few objectives in here. Notably, he's going to go into the weapon shop, or the armor shop here first, and pick up a mithril gloves. And then he's going to go into the weapon shop and pick up a mithril axe. And they're going to use this to obtain 2 more pieces of equipment for glitching. In this particular case, they're going to be they're going to turn the mithril axe into this black garb. This is another piece of equipment that was added in the GBA and PSP versions of the game. So this is not normally in the NES version of the game, and each black garb that they put on their characters raises agility by 10 points. So now each of their characters, or at least they're going to put it on 3 of the characters. They're not going to put it on the Warrior just because it's not convenient for them to be able to put that equipment on the Warrior with their party setup. So they're going to put it on the other 3 characters, which is going to give each of them 30 points of agility, which again just increases their odds to take turns earlier in the turn order, again in random encounters, and also to increase their chances to run away from combat, which is runnable. Suiko also obtains the canoe here, and then he also picked up the mithril glove. I'm not sure. Mithril glove, and turned it into a weapon known as the Lust Dagger. So this is another of the items that can be obtained, I believe, exclusively from the PSP Super Boss Chronodia. This one adds, he's put it on his 2 mages, and it adds an additional 20 points of agility. So each of the mages now has essentially 50 points of agility being added from the gear that they've glitched onto their characters. So they're going to be very good at taking their turns quickly and doing a lot of damage against enemies. It's not as worthwhile in combat, especially against bosses, but it's perfectly fine in combat against random enemies. The Barbarian Sword will highly outclass it on boss fights. So Box is doing his shopping. He's also ducked into the item shop here because he needs to purchase ethers for the mages for later. He opted not to do that in Provoca on this route. as it's less out of the way to pick it up here technically, but you can get it earlier. You can get it as early as essentially Provoca if you would like to. And Box is going to be doing very much the same, essentially the same menu here. One note here is he has to switch the character order. He either has to switch, he's usually has switched the position of his mages in order to facilitate equipment glitching. So he wants to put a Lust Dagger on each of his mages, and the only character that is capable of glitching it is the warrior. But the warrior needs to be adjacent to both characters in order to facilitate that to happen in the equipment menu. But he's only, when we start the game, we've only lined him up next to one of the characters, so he'll put it on one of the characters and then switch the positions of the other one so that he can glitch out of the other one. Suiko has made it to Ice Cave, which was our next destination after picking up the canoe here. He also took a safety save here because this is one of the nastiest dungeons in the entire game. This is easily a place where one or both players could wipe and be forced to waste a bunch of time if they get really unlucky here. Suiko will be trying to run away from everything that he can run from here. But the only real exception he's going to see here is probably Pisca Demons, the same as the ones he ran into Earth Cave and the ones he fought in Marsh Cave. And additionally here, he's going to be trying to get his Warrior and Thief killed off because they're going to be doing a grind session against the Evil Eyes that's coming up later in this dungeon. And if two of his characters are dead, essentially his mages are the only two characters standing, the mages will get twice as much experience at the end of combat against the Evil Eyes. And the Evil Eyes is by far one of the most significant sources of XP you can get in this version of the game. So Suiko's running away. His Thief's down, which is not a concern at the moment. He is on a particularly dangerous floor. There's a lot of enemies here that can do a lot of damage, especially if they ambush you. But thanks to the power of all the gear he's picked up, it makes it significantly easier to run away from many of these fights. So Suiko is healing up his mages in anticipation of a section coming up here. So Suiko's got to get through, he's got to go one more floor to get to where he needs to fight Evil Eye. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Ice Cave in this game, it's a bit of a maze. And the only way to proceed from some floors to the other is to essentially step on like specific cracked ice tiles, which drops you down to a lower floor. But if you step on the wrong spot, it could really hurt you. But it's the only way to proceed through the dungeon is to identify these cracks and fall in specific spots. Notably, you have to fall into a very tight area where you're going to be fighting Evil Eye and picking up the Levistone that we need for later. So here comes Suiko. He's coming up on the fight here while Box has begun his descent through Ice Cave. Suiko is really hoping to avoid these cockatrices in general because he doesn't want his characters to get petrified here. Although he could benefit if the warrior gets petrified, because he wants the warrior to essentially die here in this fight. So he's specifically kept his warrior at a low HP total, so that if the Evil Eye opens with one of his spells, he can cast Thundara as one of his spells. And if he's going to cast a spell, it's the first in his turn order. So he's hoping to essentially just passing turns until the warrior dies from attacks from the Evil Eye or the Evil Eye casts Thundara. And it usually does about 70 to 80 damage, so he's trying to keep him under 70, 80 damage to guarantee that he dies to that. But now that he's dead, he's going to facilitate a grind session here. His mages will be roughly level 11 or 12 by about this point, and he wants them to be level 18 before moving on. The ultimate goal is they want to be level 19 by the time that they're ready to spell shop for teleport, and they also want to be class changed at that point so that they can actually acquire teleport. So they can't buy spells early unless they're able to cast and use it. So this is why they do it in this order. So this is what's known as a trap tile here for Suiko. Each time he steps on this specific tile, it's going to force an encounter against Evil Eye. And this is abusable. So they can essentially just use this to get a ton of experience. So every 1 or 2 fights, they're going to gain a level on their mages. And they also have to pick up this Levistone before they advance. If they forget to pick that up, that is a huge mistake, and that would cost them several minutes, most likely. So they do not want to make that mistake. It looks like both of them have picked it up, so that's good. So they're just going to be attacking the Evil Eye with their mages that have Lust Daggers equipped. It will do enough damage to take them out in one hit. And they're both going to be trying to reach level 18 with their mages. If neither of the mages has died, they should both basically have identical XP amounts at this point. Looks like Sweet goes up to 17, and he's going to move on. Which you can also get away with. If you get to at least level 17, and then maybe take one more fight against Evil Eye, that usually is enough to get to level 19 by the time he gets there. But they can opt to go all the way to level 18 if they want to be safe and make sure that there's enough experience. Ooh, Suigo getting a lucky encounter there with Dark Wizard, but thankfully for him it was an ambush. Dark Wizards can end your run very quickly, especially if it's an ambush. I'm sorry, he had a preemptive, which made sure he could run very quickly. But if it was an ambush, that's very, very dangerous. But Suiko's managed to make his way out of the ice cave. Thankfully for him, that's over with, and he gets to move on here. So now that he has the Levistone, he's going to take that down to a place on the map known as the Ryukon Desert and unearth the airship. And from that point on, that will be the mode of transportation of choice, because the airship moves 4 times faster than walking on the world map and moves twice as fast as sailing. And there's no risk of enemy encounters while you're flying through the air. So it's usually the best method of transportation once you're able to acquire it. Box is all set with his grind. Now he's got to get out of this dungeon. Unfortunately, there's like an immediate forced fight right after the grind. He has to fall down through a crack in order to be able to make his way to the exit. And the first step you take here is trapped with a group of undead usually. He's trying to run away here and finally gets away, but that cost him a little bit of time here. Box just has to get through one more floor to get out of here. Suiko, meanwhile, has made his way here. So he's just going to watch a brief cutscene while we unearth the airship here. One other note, in comparison to other versions, I mean, a lot of little cutscenes have been added to this version, especially in the GBA remake, but many of them are also skippable in this version. I don't have to sit and watch a lot of the animations. So Suika now has the airship. His next objective is going to make it to the Citadel of Trials, which I believe is known as the Castle of Ordeals in the NES version. Since he's taking the airship, he has to park it kind of a long distance away because there's not really a closer landing point than the location he selected. So he's got to walk through this desert, walk through a bunch of forest and marsh tiles, and cross a small river in order to reach it. It's also possible for the players to sail there, but there's a risk of random encounters on the ocean. So, I mean, either way, he's either got to do a long walk on the overworld, or he's just got to do a long sail, and then he's got to sail back. But you can actually land at a much closer location via sailing than you can in an airship. So it's just a personal choice. Most runners use the airship from this point on, because it's less inconvenient to have to keep switching modes of transportation. So Box is going to get his airship here. And then Suiko's going to enter the Citadel of Trials here. He actually has to talk to that NPC there, because otherwise he can't utilize the throne right up here. So now he's in the teleporter maze floor of the Citadel. So he has to essentially walk through these teleporters in each of the rooms, and each of these rooms has 1 or 2 teleporters. He wants to make sure that he specifically uses the correct teleporter, which is usually the rightmost or the bottommost in a specific room when there's a choice. If he happens to pick the wrong one, it's just going to put him back at the start of the floor, so he doesn't want to pick the wrong one, because that'll just waste time. So he made it through, no problem. Most of these runners know exactly where they're going on that. So Suiko's on the last floor here. He's got to get into this room here, And as soon as he steps into here, there's a forced fight with these nightmare enemies on this specific tile. So each time he steps on this, this will force an encounter with one or two of these nightmares. He can opt to attack them or try to run away from them. It's usually it's more consistently faster to attack them, as they can be somewhat difficult to run from, even with our equipment. And then he's also going to pick up a healing staff here, because that's going to be a really important item that he's going to glitch with that later on. So once he's done that, he has to backtrack and do that nightmare tile one more time. And then he has to make his way to the end, pick up the rat tail in the chest, and then exit. There's going to be one more forced fight with dragon zombies there. And he really wants to make sure that he's 19 or very close to 19 by the time he exits here. Box is only one floor behind right now. So it looks like Box is making up some time. And there's an ambush. That's going to slow Suiko down a little bit. So now they're both on the same floor. It's just Suiko's at the end of the floor. Or very close. Oh, Box is opting to run here. He must think he's got enough experience. Hopefully for him he does. We'll find out soon enough. But he also needs this healing staff here. They have to pick that up because they need to use it to glitch another piece of post-game equipment known as the Lordly Robe. It's a piece of armor that can grant 20 points of intelligence. It will be super useful for our white mage especially, and our black mage, to raise the damage totals they can do with either the combat items or the magic spells they've bought here. So now that Suiko has the rat tail here, he's going to step on the tile before this little throne here, and there's a forced fight with dragon zombies there before he can use it and exit. So Suiko's all set here. Box is just picking up the tail and has to fight the zombie dragons now. Still a very close race right now. Box had the early lead for the good part of this run until, I believe it was Earth Cave, where it flipped to Suiko, and Suiko's held the lead since then. It could easily flip again, though. They're both well within a minute of each other right now. Alright, so once they have the rat tail, their next destination is to visit Bahamut in the dragon caves over here. They want to land on that specific island and go in this specific hole on the island. In order to reach Bahamut, it's just two very long chambers here that they have to walk through, but there's no risk of encounters or anything, so there's just a bunch of time while they reach him here. And this is going to facilitate the class change. So once they have the rat tail here, they can present it to Bahamut, who can upgrade their classes to the Knight, the Ninja, the White Wizard, and the Black Wizard. This allows them to essentially purchase and use additional spells and equipment. The only really important reason we have to class change is because it is required for the Black Wizard to be able to, for the Black Mage to be a Black Wizard in order to purchase and use Teleport. And Teleport is one of the most critical spells in this run for saving time, as it can be used to go back one floor in a dungeon, and that saves a ton of time backtracking. So here we go. They're going to do another high five here in the Dragon Caves. Suiko's going to move on. He's going to be doing a couple little errands before he makes his way to Mount Gulg here. Notably, he's going to go over here to the Desert Caravan, which is a little kind of unmarked here on the map. It's just a little different here. He needs to purchase this Fairies bottle in order to get a key item later on. And additionally, in this version of the game and the GBA version, once you have obtained the Fairy bottle from this vendor, a new inventory of items opens up for sale. And a lot of these are just tonics that can be used in combat to increase statistics or HP totals of characters temporarily in combat. Notably, they're going to be picking up Giant's tonics from this inventory, because that is an item they can use in combat to raise one of their characters' max HP by 200 for the duration of the combat. It's more of a safety item on the final fight against Chaos if their characters don't happen to gain enough natural HP over the course of the run. But if They specifically want the ninja slash thief to have approximately 300 or more HP by the time he reaches chaos, and they would prefer the black mage to have probably at least 250, but even more is preferable for the final fight. If they have that, they don't really need to use the tonics, but it's useful to have the tonics just in case they need them here. They purchase 11 of them because it takes just as many button presses to buy 11 as it does to buy 2 of them. And there's really no reason to shortchange yourself just in case something goes horribly wrong in combat. Plus, money is not a concern. So Suiko took the bottled fairy over to Gaia, and as soon as he got in there, the fairy was released and ventured over to a spring all the way at the back of the town. You can see Box making his way there right now. So you have to go visit the ferry in the back of the town in order to obtain the Oxyale, which is needed to be able to traverse the Sunken Shrine coming up. But before we do that, Suiko's going to be going to Mount Gulg here and taking on Marilith, the second of the 4 elemental fiends. This could be a little dangerous for Suiko here. He might not be able to run away from this combat. Oh, he is. Okay. So there is a specific formation that can appear here, Ogre Mage and Hellhounds, and sometimes the group appears without the Hellhounds, so it looks just like a pair of Ogre Mages or one Ogre Mage, and that formation is actually unrunnable. But if there's also another formation including Ogre Mages including Ogre Chiefs, and that one is runnable, but the 2 formations can look very similar to each other and easily confuse runners that are just not aware of that difference. Luckily for Suiko, that was the runnable formation, but Suiko's running very dangerous right here. So he's stepping on all these lava tiles because each lava tile he steps on does not risk getting an encounter. Oh, that's very close because that could have been almost a game over for Suiko if he had failed to run there. So they're generally going to be maximizing their running on lava tiles to minimize the number of tiles they can get encounters on. Taking each tile they step on does 1 point of damage to each of their party members. Their party members can't go below 1 HP from damage from lava, though. So they can't die from there. Ooh, we get the unrunnable fire elemental on Suiko's side. That's a bit of an unusual enemy to see. Oh, this is really bad for Box. Oh, he's got health on his white mage, though. Lucky for him. If his white mage had been at lower HP, that very well could have been a wipe. So for those of you that are just joining us, this is our FF1 any percent PSP tournament. We have just called it the Total Chaos Tournament due to the fact that there is a lot of RNG in this run, and there's a lot of fun to be had watching runners experience misery and having lead changes and things like that. So we've already seen a couple lead changes in this run just due to the extreme RNG that is featured in this run. So the Total Chaos name by itself means nothing. It's just the name of the tournament. It's to give you guys an idea of what to expect, though, when you come and watch these runs. So Suiko is the first one to take down Marilith here. Marilith is kind of a pushover with the Barbarian Swords. They just need to do 1,440 damage to her, which can typically take 2 to 3 melee attacks with our characters, but she's not a particular threat at this point in the run. And they will usually be spell shopping immediately after Marilith, so they want to make sure that at the very least their mages are level 19 by this point. They will usually be 19 by natural experience, especially if they grinded in the Ice Cave until at least level 18 on their mages. But if not, they can. There were a couple other opportunities they had, including the Dragon Zombies and Citadel. They could have repeated there just to make sure they have enough experience. But they specifically want to be level 19 by this point in the run because they want to spell shop here. And they need to pick up Teleport from Melmond. They're going to stop here in Elfheim because it's closer, and they need to pick up Haste for their mage especially. And on Suiko's case, he's also going to pick up Blizzara because he doesn't have another spell that does ice damage at this point. Box already has a combat item in his inventory called the Black Robe, which can cast Blizzara. So he's not going to be picking up the spell. And now Suiko's making his second detour here. He's going to pick up Hilara for the White Mage and Teleport for the Black Mage. Hilara is going to be his primary healing spell from this point on, and will be exclusively healing with the White Mage on the final fight using Hilara in order to make sure the party can survive the damage that Chaos is doing. Yeah, they're not far behind at all at this point. So now Suiko is all done with his errands and is going to be making his way now to the Sunken Shrine, but he has to. The entrance is in a town called Onrak here, and he needs to make sure that he has the Oxy Ale from visiting Gaia earlier in order to be able to proceed into the Sunken Shrine here. So they both did that before they went into Mount Gog. Oh, but Suiko's getting the NPC block here. This very narrow passageway leading over to the entrance to Sunken Shrine. This NPC can occasionally wander down from the area just above here and block you and waste a bunch of time. That was a really unfortunate position for him. If the NPCs get in your way, you really can't do anything other than to try to push them out of the way. They will move a little bit faster if you push against them, but you have to hope that they choose to go in the direction you want them to go, and ideally you just don't want them in the way anyway, so you don't have to push them. But here we go with the Sunken Shrine. Box is in Onrak getting ready to start the Sunken Shrine here. Hopefully he's not going to get NPC blocked. Oh, he's also going to get blocked here, but the NPC spent way less time blocking him here. So Suiko starts the Sunken Shrine here, and will be trying to work his way down first. Actually, he'll be working his way up 2 floors to pick up the Rosetta Stone, which is a key item needed to be able to access the dungeon where Tiamat is hiding right now. And meanwhile, they have to do that first, and then they will detour and go in the other direction and go fight Kraken at the bottom of this one. So the third of the 4 bosses is located at the bottom of this dungeon, and there's a key item in a slightly opposite direction here. So they're going to have to make their way first. Looks like Suiko has a slight lead here, but he's getting unfortunate. They're both getting unfortunate luck here with these encounters. So this Hagen Prince and Chief combination, if they see it, it's unrunnable. Easiest way to clear it is for them to use Thundara with their Black Mage on Suiko's case, or use the Gauntlets in combat. Specifically, he's set up his White Mage to do the most damage with Intelligence gear at this point. So the White Mage will be using the Gauntlets in combat to take them on. So this is a group of Ghosts, which is also unrunnable on Box's side. These guys are vulnerable to fire, so Box will be using the Mage's Staff to cast Fire, or Suiko will be using the Spellfire, which he purchased early on in Alfheim, to take them out if they see them. This is already like the 3rd unrunnable for Box, so this is slowing him down. They could additionally use the Judgment Staff they have early. They picked up like immediately at the very beginning of the run. But as you can kind of see from playing this, the animation for Fyra and Thundara is significantly shorter than the flare animation that the Judgment Staff casts. So it's preferable to use that because it does enough damage to kill them and saves a few seconds of animation time. Box is onto the floor with the Rosetta Stone here. There's no enemies on this floor. They just have to make their way through a bit of a windy maze here to get over to the room where the thing is. So now that Box has the Rosetta Stone here, he's going to be utilizing teleport for the first time on his character and start working his way back. So this is going to be the first instance of time saving here. Otherwise, he would have to walk back on this entire floor to get there. And he's going to teleport twice to return to the floor he came in on, and then we'll start heading in the opposite direction. Suiko has already started doing that, and he's 1 or 2 floors ahead right now. Box getting another unrunnable. This is really slowing him down with all the unrunnables he's getting here. And there's really nothing he can do about this. He just has to, if he sees these unrunnables, he just has to quickly identify that and use the appropriate item or spell to take them out as quickly as possible. It's one of the things that's outside of the control of the players in this run, unfortunately. But it's one of the things that makes it very exciting for viewers, because you can see things swing very dramatically. And in some cases, it could facilitate a lead change, or somebody could get really, really, unfortunately, screwed by the RNG. So it's very easy for somebody to catch up, and there's no lead is really safe until very late in the run. So here we go. They're both now on the same floor. Looks like Box has been doing very well in terms of at least identifying enemies and taking them down as quickly as possible, and then being able to run away here. But their goal on this second to last floor of the dungeon is to detour and pick up a light axe. They need this specifically to turn this into a piece of armor known as a survival vest. This is another of the PSP exclusive items that can drop off the PSP Super Boss. But they need this survival vest because it gives the most agility in the entire game for a single item other than the Lust Dagger. It gives 15 points of agility for each copy they put on their characters. So they're going to be putting 3 copies on all of their characters. And additionally, they might be putting, I think, only 2 on the Black Wizard, because they want to be putting a mix of survival vests and lordly robes on their characters to make sure that they have both enough agility and enough intelligence to take early turns in the combat order and then do enough damage with their spells to take out unrunnable enemy groups. And this will essentially be their end game gear from this point on. They will make, I believe, one more. There will be one more glitch coming up after the Sunken Shrine here, where they pick up ribbons, and then there will be one final glitch menu just before the final boss. So Box is again just fighting through a slog of enemies here. But they're both on Kraken's floor here. Looks like Suiko has a bit of a lead, but it's not a very large lead at all. And if he gets enough encounters, Box could overtake him on this floor. Ooh, and Suiko sees the other unrunnable encounter, which we haven't seen to this point in this one. So there's actually 3 different unrunnable encounters you can possibly see in the shrine. You can see that's a Hagen Prince Chief combo. You can see the Ghost, and you can also see the Water Elementals. All 3 of those combinations are unrunnable. And each of them is vulnerable to a different element, so you'll see them use all different spells to take care of each of them. You would probably think that Water Elementals might be vulnerable to lightning, but they're actually not. They're vulnerable to ice in this version of the game, so Blizzara is the spell of choice to take them down. They tend to be much rarer than the other unrunnables, though. Suiko is the first into the Kraken fight here. Box is literally just behind him, so that's not even 5 seconds, it looks like, between the 2 of them right now. And unlike the NES version, with the gear we have, our characters are extremely safe against Kraken, and Kraken is a complete pushover in this version. Box even gets the Kikuichi Manji drop. That won't factor into anything, but it's a very unusual item to see drop in this run. That's actually another change from the NES version. There weren't any item drops in the NES version of the game. They added items that could be dropped in as a reward for combat against certain enemies in this run. There's only a couple where that really matters. There's you can fight dragon zombies and get mega elixirs, which didn't exist in the original game. There's a couple of enemies that drop a couple items that can be used for glitching, but they could also mess you up if they happen to be dropped, as they can ruin the position of items that are ordered in your inventory and mess up your glitching. So some enemies don't really want to see them drop certain items. Yeah, it looks like Box did get the rare katana, the Kikuichi Manji. That's more an amusement than anything. It has no impact on this run, as far as I'm aware. So now that they're out of the Sunken Shrine here, they took down Kraken, which is the 3rd of the 4 fiends, and they have to move on and get to the final fiend, Tiamat, in the Flying Fortress. But they can't get into the Flying Fortress yet. They need 2 key items to be able to access it. They specifically need to get the Chime to be able to enter the Mirage Tower, which hosts the entrance to the Flying Fortress, and then they need the Warp Cube in order to be able to actually get into the Flying Fortress. And they can't get the Chime until they visit the town of Lufenia, but they can't talk to the NPCs in Lufenia until they obtain the Rosetta Stone from the Sunken Shrine and then take that to an NPC in Melman that can translate it for them. So they have to do a couple of errands before they are able to get into uh, Tiamat's dungeon. So they're both slogging their way through the Waterfall Cavern here. The Warp Cube is going to be an NPC in the final room of this Waterfall dungeon. Actually has the Warp Cube, and they just have to reach him and talk to him in order to get it. And additionally, one of the treasure chests in here actually has a ribbon. And the ribbon is probably one of the most powerful defensive items in the original game. And with the equipment glitch, we can actually just essentially make copies of the ribbon and put it on each of our characters. We don't have to pick up multiple ribbons or detour in multiple dungeons to pick up multiple ribbons. We can pick up one ribbon here, perform a glitch to turn it into its equivalent item called the Geegantax, and then won't actually use the Geegantax itself. We'll just use that to glitch more copies of the ribbon, and they will put that on their characters. And the advantage of putting that on is it essentially makes them immune to most status effects except for like maybe an instant KO attack, but it also reduces damage from elemental spells. So once they have that, it greatly reduces their ability to lose at this point to any random encounters unless they're just extremely unprepared for it. So here we see Suiko is doing the menu here. He picked up the ribbon and is glitching it onto multiple characters. And then he's going to teleport out, because walking out of this waterfall cave is a nightmare. The encounter rate there is super high, and it's not a lot of fun to go through there twice. Box looks like he's all set as well, so he's going to teleport out. Difference is maybe 15 seconds right now. Box is doing his best effort to try to catch up, but he's just slightly behind at this point and needs to get a little bit luckier. Either that or he needs Suiko to get a little unluckier. So since they have the Rosetta Stone, they have to just take it here to this NPC in the back of Emelmund called Dr. Un, who can translate it for them. And then they're going to teleport out after they're all set, teleport or translating it, because it's quicker than walking out. Teleport also happens to be a very cheap spell. It only costs 5 MP to cast in this version of the game, so they have plenty of MP for that. Box is also that he's going to teleport out. Their next destination here is Lufenia. Now that that's translated, they need to go in here and pick up the chime now that they can speak the language of the NPCs here. Unfortunately for them, Lufenia is located in somewhat of a remote location, and just like the Citadel of Trials, the nearest landing spot, in this case the only landing spot, is a bit of a walk away. So they're going to have to traverse this long overworld path, and they're subject to attacks by these Minotaur zombie enemies especially. If they happen to see them, they're unrunnable and they have to stop and kill them. The only other enemy of note that they're really worried about here is Winter Wolves, which can do some damage with an Ice Storm attack. They're only really dangerous in an ambush situation, though. So they both have to stop and essentially kill these groups of Minotaur zombies. If they happen to see them with trolls, that's also an unrunnable formation that they have to kill. They really just don't want to see that. Here we got the Winter Wolves here on Suiko's side, but he's able to get away from them very quickly. This is Box's chance right here if he can get in. All right, Box takes the lead. He was the first one to get in there. Just had a better run here over to Lufenia, so Box once again in the lead here. But he's getting NPC blocked here, and that might give Suiko the chance to go right back and take the lead. Oh, but Suiko's also going to get blocked here. That's really unfortunate for both of them. Yeah, whoever designed Lufenia was not a fan of speedrunners. Yep, once they're all set here, they teleport out. And they just have to make their way back to the airship here. Yeah, Suiko had a slightly more cooperative NPC. But neither one had a really great one. He was stuck right in the middle of a long corridor. Alright, Box is the first one back to his ship here. And he's going to make his way to the Mirage Tower. The landing spot's very close to where he was landed for Lufenia. If you play the NES version of the game, I don't believe this landing spot is actually a thing. Many of the landing spots for some of the locations of this game have been altered from the map in the NES version to be more convenient. Especially some of the other remakes. If you're trying to fly to the Citadel of Trials in the PlayStation version, the landing spot we use in this run doesn't actually exist in the PlayStation version. You have to go even farther to the east in order to find a landing spot. And a lot of the NES runners, a number of the runners in this tournament also play the FF1 randomizer, and sometimes you'll see them land at a slightly less than optimal landing spot in this version, just because they're more used to that in the NES version. So they're both here in the Mirage Tower here. They have to get through 3 floors. The first floor is pretty much like they walk in a door, they walk out a door, and they go up the stairs very quickly. This second floor is easily the longest of the 3 floors, and usually features the most random encounters. The encounter rate here can be very variable, though. They can make very quick work of this floor, or they can get slammed with encounters and any number of variances in between that. So they want to get through that second floor as quickly as possible. Box is onto the final floor. Suiko's very close to getting off this floor. When they enter this room here, this is the final room in Mirage Tower, they run immediately into this Blue Dragon, which is an unrunnable encounter here. This is a forced fight, so they have to kill that in order to advance. And then they use the Warp Cube here to be able to teleport up to Flying Fortress and start making their way towards Tiamat. In this particular category of the game, they don't need anything from Flying Fortress, so they can basically just beeline immediately to Tiamat. But they got to go through 5 floors to get there. So Box is almost done with the first floor here. Suiko is just 1 floor back right now. The only enemies I don't really want to see here, especially on this first and second floor, are Evil Eyes. It's the same enemy as the one they ran into the ice cave, but it's unrunnable here. So they really just don't want to see that. Anything they don't have to fight is a plus at this point. Suiko's goes on to the second floor. Box is now on the 4th floor. Needs to make it through 1 more floor after this one. So this is the Warmech floor, and it's also Tiamat's floor. We're kind of hoping to see some Warmechs in this tournament, because Warmech is probably one of the rarest enemies in the game here, and could be very dangerous if they happen to encounter him. But it's really, really cool if you get to see a Warmech. Not very common. It's like a 1 in 64 chance of being of any random encounter on this floor. They're both on the floor now. Box is going to start the fight against Tiamat here. Tiamat has 2400 HP in this fight. If he is lucky with his rolls and hastes the thief, he can take that down in 2 hits. So this is the first instance you'll see Box take advantage of haste in order to increase the damage his characters can do. As haste essentially doubles the number of attacks the character does. So it more or less doubles their damage. But Box had no problem whatsoever. That fight went basically perfect for him. Suiko's just behind him, but he's getting, unfortunately, slammed by encounters on this last floor. Neither one has seen a Tiamat yet, but it's still possible to get one on the tiles that they have to walk in order to get out of this floor. Here we see a brief cutscene here. So that for those of you that are not familiar with this version of the game, in the GBA version of the game, they added some additional bonus dungeons, one themed after each of the same elements. And after you defeat each fiend, a short cutscene plays showing you the opening of the bonus dungeon that's associated with it. We don't actually visit the bonus dungeons in this version, but they're unskippable cutscenes that you just have to watch after the fight. So they're all set. They're both all set to go into the final dungeon to take on Chaos at this point. They don't need anything else. They don't need any supplies. They don't need to go into an inn like in the NES version and heal up or use any tents or anything like that because they have the ability to save anywhere. They also have more, and there's also have additional items that they didn't have in those versions, like ethers to help replenish their MP. They don't have to rest to replenish spell charges or anything like that. Looks like Box is going to be the first one to get in here. He's just got to wait for this cutscene to play out, and then he can get in there. Suiko's all set, though. He's going to head out of Flying Fortress, and it's going to start making his way over while Box begins the final descent here. Box opting to take a safety save here, which is very wise. There are nasty enemies all over the Chaos Shrine, which could end runs if he's really unlucky. And we're going to start looking at the HP totals of their characters at this point to see how they're lining up. We want to see, you ideally want to see the Thief with about 300 or more HP, max HP, and you want to see the Black Mage with probably 250 or more. 160 is very low for Box, but it's not likely to make a significant difference at this point. It just means he might be at risk of dying in one of the early rounds against Chaos. So Box is on to the third floor here in the Chaos Shrine, while Suiko's about to get into the first floor here. This is probably one of the slowest floors that he's got to get through because there can be encounters with like green dragons, which slow him down. These are unrunnable. Just about everything else is runnable here. And you also don't want to see white dragons on the first floor, especially. White dragons could be one of the most lethal enemies here. This is the Death Eye. It's known as the Phantom in the NES version, but with the power of the Barbarian Sword, he's kind of a pushover in this version. But he is a forced fight here. Suiko's seeing some white dragons. He really wants to run away from these and doesn't want to see them use Ice Storm, because Ice Storm does a lot of damage and wastes a bunch of time. And he really doesn't want to see ambushes here, because that could be very deadly if he's unlucky. Suiko taking a slightly risky path doing that, but he gets away with it, and he's going to heal up. Box, meanwhile, running into dragon zombies over here. They're the same enemy as the ones we ran into Citadel, and they're unrunnable here. So if he sees them, he's forced to stop and kill them. Green dragons here for Suiko. He's got to take them out. Box has got to run it. This is probably one of the worst fights that Box doesn't want to see here, is Ice Gigas Winterwolf. He's been using these other combat items to try to clear enemy fights as quickly as possible, but unfortunately for him, the Gigases tend to have too much HP for the Mage's Staff with his current equipment setup, so he has to use the Judgment Staff instead, which is a longer animation. Oh, we got a nice and 4 White Dragon ambush on Box's side. This is pretty nasty for both players right now. They're both just getting really unlucky here. Box is... Oh, geez, all 4 did Ice Storm on Box. That's really, really dangerous for him right here. That's a wipe, I think, for Box, unfortunately. That's really unfortunate. So that's going to put Suiko back in the lead, because I believe Box saved at the very beginning of the Chaos Shrine, so that's going to put him currently 3 floors behind. Yeah, he's going to have to make his way all over again, so that's really unfortunate for Box, but there's not much he can do about it, except just run as fast as possible and get in here. Purple Worms are unrunnable, so this is a mistake by Box. Might be a little tilted from that wipe, unfortunately. Box could have opted to kill those white dragons, but he got really unlucky that he got ambushed by 4 of them and that all 4 opted to do Ice Storm. That's really about the worst possible luck he can see. So, Box is behind right now and is going to have to fight to make up time. Suiko, on the other hand, should be better. I think Suiko's chosen route through the game is actually going to be a little better served here in the Chaos Shrine, because he's going to be able to use Fire to take out groups like Ice Gigas Winterwolf, whereas Box has to use the Judgments, have to do that, which takes a couple seconds longer to do that. So here's Suiko getting 4 white dragons. This could flip around his... He also did not heal before this fight, so his characters are a little vulnerable here if they don't run away. They do run away. He might want to heal here, just to make sure he can survive this here. Okay, so Suiko should be okay here. But he's got to watch. He's still got to watch out for ambushes, because that can still do a lot of damage. And he got more dragons here. Lucky for him, he gets away here. And he's onto the final basement floors now in the Chaos Shrine. So each of these is basically themed after the 4 fiends. The first one's going to be after Lich, and he's going to see a lot of the Earth enemies here. Really doesn't want to see Earth Elementals here, as those are unrunnable, and he's going to have to stop and fight them. Looks like he's stuck in a little indecision here about whether or not he's going to be able to do enough damage to kill them with Fire, or if he should just use Judgment Staff and make sure that he is able to kill them. Judgment Staff takes longer, but it definitely guarantees that it's going to die in 1 round. Fire, although with his party setup, he probably has enough intelligence to be able to kill them with Fire. I'm just not sure if he knows that, or is experienced enough to know that at this point. Box has to take down these dragon zombies before he can move on. He's like currently 1 floor behind right now, but it's a long floor, so he's still got to work through it. I'm sorry, he's 2 floors behind. Ooh, Box didn't want to see this one. That's going to be another long Judgment Staff animation. Box is going to take a safety save here before Lich 2. So he tries to exit this floor. Any of these 4 tiles around the stairwell are all trapped, and you will encounter Lich on any of them before you can get to the floor. So Lich in this version, the original version's only got 1200. In this one, he's got 2800. And Lich can actually cast Flare, the same spell that we've been using with the Judgment Staff. So we really don't want to see him do that, because that can do a lot of damage to our party member, potentially wipe the party if we're unprepared. And it's a very long animation. Just don't want to see that, if possible. But Suiko gets through him, and is probably in pretty good shape to get into Chaos first at this point, but it depends on the encounters on these next 3 floors. So Suiko is now on Marilith's floor. Has to just get here. This is the shortest of the floors, except for Tiamat's floor. Tiamat's is a very short floor. But it's not a very complicated floor, and the enemies are usually pretty easy to get into and out of combat from. The only exception is if he sees Fire Elementals, which are not very common at all. So Suiko now has to take on Marilith. Marilith has 3200 in this fight, so that will usually take 2 rounds of attacks from the melee characters. Usually 3 or 4 hits will do enough. Marilith is not really a threat to our party at this point in time. The most harmful thing she can do is cast Firaga, which just lowers our character's HP, or potentially kills them if you're unprepared. But if you're properly prepared, she's kind of a pushover in this particular one. But now Suiko's got to make his way probably through the most annoying of the 4 floors, the Kraken floor. Mostly because these water elementals are a very common encounter on this floor, and they are unrunnable here. So he does not want to see them, because a lot of them, being forced to stop and kill a lot of them, can slow him down. Box is getting flared. That might be a wipe, unfortunately for him. Well, he's going to have to get a character up. He's not sure what he wants to do here. He's not sure if he's close to killing him or if he has to do... It's probably wiser for Box to try to get one of his melee characters up with a Phoenix down. He's got to hope that Lich doesn't attack him or stop him. And Suiko, on the other hand, is just capitalizing on the luck here right now. Okay, so Box is through, but that was a very hairy moment for him. And he's unfortunately still 2 fiends behind right now, as Suiko takes down Kraken. Kraken, again, is just a pushover in this particular iteration. Doesn't do a lot of very nasty attacks other than Thundara at this point. So he's, again, still a pushover, but he does have 3,600 HP, which could take a couple rounds of combat here. So Suiko immediately moves on to Tiamat's floor and is going to take him on, Tiamat's floor being the shortest floor. So Tiamat has a huge HP pool in this fight, though. He's got 5,500 HP, which can take 3 or 4 rounds of combat. So Suiko's actually going to haste his thief to try to get this to be a little bit quicker. Box, meanwhile, is going to do his best to get caught up, but he's still 2 fiends behind right now. Okay, Tiamat's down for Suiko, so that's just one major fight left, but he's got to get through the rest of this floor first, which still is subject to random encounters. Once he gets onto the next floor, there's no more random encounters, though. Alright, so Suiko is essentially home free here. He just needs to get into the room, make sure his party's correctly set up, and then begin the chaos fight. The biggest thing he wants to make sure he's got with his party set up at this point, he wants to make sure he's got enough MP on his characters. He wants to make sure they're fully healed as well. And he also wants to make sure that he's taken off all the agility gear, specifically from the White Mage, so that she takes her turn last in the combat order during the fight, and that's predictable. And additionally, he wants to make sure that he puts on the correct gear on his Black Mage, because he's going to be doing melee attacks with his Black Mage after the Black Mage is done hasting everyone. So he wants to make sure that he's utilizing a Barbarian Sword instead of a Lust Dagger, because the Lust Dagger does very little damage to Chaos compared to a Barbarian Sword. Box is kind of in a bit of a tough spot here. He really, at this point, kind of needs a wipe from Suiko, but Suiko's probably in a good enough shape that he'll be able to get through it. So Suiko's going to open this by, instead of attacking this first round, he's going to use the Giant's Tonics he picked up from the caravan earlier to raise the max HP of both his Thief and Black Mage, since they have relatively low max HP totals at this point. They didn't really hit the requisite totals he wants, so he wants to make sure that he can guarantee that this is going to be a much safer fight. And if they can survive that opening round, then he's in pretty much great shape at this point. So Suiko is just going to go ham with his Warrior and Thief. White Mage is exclusively on heal duty at this point. Black Mage will be hasting Ninja, Warrior, and Black Mage in that order, and then attacking from that point on. And once the party's set up, the rest of it is just going to be hold X to win, because they can essentially just hold X to repeat their combat orders. Box with his Black Mage down in the Tiamat fight. Probably not a big deal right now. Suiko looks to have this on lockdown right now, so he's just going to have to wait a couple more combat rounds. This usually takes 6 or 7 rounds. Suiko really doesn't want to see these long special attacks from Chaos, Blaze, Tsunami, Cyclone, as they just waste a lot of time doing animations. And they can be deadly to his party, although his party setup is very solid at this point, so he should not be at danger of losing anybody. Box needs to set up his party as well here before the fight. Needs to make sure he's healed up and ethered up on his characters. He needs to make sure he has the agility gear off of his characters. Here comes Cyclone on Suiko's screen. As you guys can clearly see here, it's a very long animation. It's by far the longest animation and it just wastes a ton of time. And it does a lot of damage, but it's not going to be enough to kill Suiko's characters. And there it is. That is GG for Suiko. Alright, Box is going to start the chaos fight here. That's a dangerous opening for Box because his HP on his Black Mage is very low. Oh, but he had just enough to survive that, so Box is probably okay at this point. He just had to survive that opening round. Although he's not healing as much as I would expect him to. So he might be at danger of losing his Black Mage here. That might cost him, unfortunately. So there might not be anything Box can do about this right here. He might lose his Black Mage here. Oh, he survives. Look, lucky him. Box is hanging on by a thread here, but if Cyclone comes, he could definitely see problems too. If he gets all three in sequence, that could be very dangerous. That could easily wipe two characters. Zaga, that's probably okay. It's going to do a bunch of damage, but not as much as Cyclone would have done. So that gives him a reprieve here. So Box is probably okay at this point. Now that he survived that, he should be in pretty good shape. But if that had been Cyclone, that may very well have cost him his Thief and his Black Mage, and that could have wiped. So Box, I believe, is on round 4 right now. No, this should be round 5. Here comes Cyclone here, but it's a little late for Chaos. That's not going to do enough when everybody's at full health for him to really be in danger at this point. It should be either this round or the next round. That was a nice hit from the Thief, though. That might be enough. Let's see. Nope, it's going to be one more round of combat. There it is. That is GG for Box. So this is a combination. So GG's to Suiko and Box. We'll see if we can get them in here shortly for interviews. Hopefully these guys can get in here shortly. Would love to talk with them about this race. And we're joined by Boxmeister.
Oh.
Well, that sucked, didn't it?
That run was something, I can tell you.
I mean, you were fine until the 4 White Dragon ambush, and then that unfortunately really put you in a bad spot.
Yeah, that 4 White Dragon ambush was impossible for me to get something good out of still.
And we're also joined by Suiko. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Suiko. Please correct me if I'm not.
Just about, yeah.
Congratulations, Suiko.
Thank you. I figured I lost that race with how bad my movement was and my minion wing.
It was interesting. Box had I believe Box had the early lead, and then Suiko, I believe, had the early lead, and Box caught up in, I believe it was the Earth Cave, and it was pretty good up until I want to say Kraken. It flipped around again, but it was flipping a little bit back and forth. But the determining factor was Box unfortunately got a 4 White Dragon ambush in Chaos Shrine, and they all did Ice Storm.
Yeah,
I was curious what happened because I thought I was going to lose that game. I was Hawkeye in that chat, waiting for that dot.
Basically, I was left with a warrior and a thief at 25 HP against 4 dragons. Yeah, no way. The only thing I could reasonably try was to run, but they swiped it down on me. And the Lich too, I barely managed to pull through, just like the yesterday evening, basically.
I actually had good Lich RNG this run for once.
I had Flare on Lich 2 again.
Oh,
And my white mage was the only survivor, and I managed to get my warrior back up.
well, that's good.
Because I was like, yeah, if I want to have any remote chance of winning, I need to forego saving. So I was like, yeah, resetting is not an option. We're going straight on.
I didn't save in a shrine, and of course, as soon as I did, it scared me because what was it like? The first encounter was cockatrices that was the first ambush that couldn't run right away from.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where the most dangerous spots for you. I think the most dangerous spot I saw you was Mount Gulg. You were running very low on HP there.
Yeah, but I saved you save before Mount Gold just because one bad ambush can just kill you. That whole thing.
Yeah, it's never a
It
bad idea.
almost went very poorly for me in Mount Gilk as well, by the way. But yeah, I also had on Lich 1, I had 2 Blizzaras in a row. Luckily, I saved before it, but jeez.
I thankfully didn't have any problem on Lich this run, but the one that gave me most trouble was TM at 2. Killed my Black Mage.
Tiamat 2 is usually pretty rough on the Black Mage, especially if the Black Mage has somewhat lower HP, like, for example, mine has, or I'm not sure what your Black Mage has.
204 HP going into that fight.
Okay, yeah, I had 171 or so. So it's...
Yeah, that was actually very close on Box's end because Chaos opened with Blaze and Tsunami and
Chaos could have had my Black Mage at least 2 times. I was very lucky on the attack rolls.
yeah, you chose to Blizzaga on the 3rd turn instead of doing Cyclone. Cyclone almost certainly would have wiped the Ninja and the Black Mage on that one.
Yeah, the Blizzaga managed to get me into the safe spot. God. But yeah, it's... I mean, I had a good bunch of good luck last night, and this time I wasn't as lucky. So yeah, it kind of balances out. But nevertheless, a good race because we were very close.
Oh yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, this has been turning into a remarkably well-balanced group so far, this group that we're in.
Right? I mean, save for my first race against Chris. Yeah, I'm drastically improved my.
Yeah, was that a PB for you, Suiko?
No, I PB'd last night during a practice run, so no, that's not a PB.
Not a PB. It's still a great time though. And
Oh yeah,
your first win in the tournament?
yes, that was my first run. Yeah,
Sweet. Congratulations on that. It's always
thank
cool
you.
to see that. So unless you guys have anything else to shout out or want to discuss here, we'll start to wrap this up.
I am going to bed. It's really late here.
Yeah, I don't know what you're still doing up.
I don't have anything myself.
All right. Well, I'll thank you guys for the race here. I'll thank Speed Gaming for their assistance with restreaming this tonight, and I'll thank everybody else for tuning in and watching here. I hope you guys will tune in tomorrow. We have I believe 4 matches going on tomorrow, but they will be combined into 2 4-way races, I believe at 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time.
I'm in one of them, I remember.
So we hope you guys will look forward to that. It should be on the Speed Gaming channels. But with that, we'll say good night, and then we'll hopefully see you guys tomorrow. So thanks everyone for watching. Have a good evening.